Welcome to the Strategic Thinkers Podcast. This is going to be episode 3, and where we started off with the business model and business plan, and then started talking about getting funding and different ways to be able to build and scale. Today, we're going to talk about reading the room, human nature, ego, and business decisions. So, with that, if you've ever made a decision that looked right on paper but felt wrong later, this episode is for you because most business mistakes aren't math problems, they're people problems. Today, we're talking about how ego, timing, psychology, and human nature quietly drive the decisions that either build what we're creating or slowly undermine it. So, this is going to be great for entrepreneurs, operators, corporate leaders, investors, and anyone really navigating people. Because at the end of the day, people are the ones that we're actually dealing with. So with that, I want to say, Mr. Kent, Jeffrey, thank you so much. This has been great. We're 3 episodes in, and I'm enjoying it. This is a great conversation for me. So thank you so much, and welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having me. I'm happy that you're interested in talking to me for this long, but and hopefully your audience wants to hear what I have to say. But I'm excited to be here with you and enjoying this conversation as well.
Well, I'm a student of the game, so I love having these conversations. I think they're important for us to be able to have because iron sharpens iron. So if we're not having these conversations, we can end up missing context, only living in our own world and our own bubble. And we need to be able to have different perspectives to be able to make sure that we're looking at things right. Otherwise, we create blind spots. And that's funny enough going to be one of the things that we actually talk about today. Let's start with pattern recognition as leverage. We've talked about strategy and funding, but underneath all of that are people. So, why do some patterns show up in completely different industries, and what do they tell you about human nature?
Yeah. So what I'll tell most entrepreneurs is, and actually I tell all entrepreneurs this, is that every industry has nuances, right? So,
Hmm.
but that's actually, I think it's I don't think there's any study with this, but I attribute that to being maybe 1% of what you encounter. 99% of what happens, when you pull the cover up from any business, it's all the same. It doesn't matter what the industry is. Every business, regardless of the industry, has to have an accounting function, a finance function, a sales function, a human resource function, so on and so forth. So virtually everything businesses do is the same. But again, every industry has certain nuances. Again, I don't think that's a huge factor for what happens within the industry, but there is that nuance. And so when you start to see behavioral changes from company to company, that nuance is, I think, that tends to explain why you find differences, because it's just normal in one industry to do certain things a certain way, and in another industry, things are done in a completely different way. um but again, as I said, I'm one who firmly believes that, um you know businesses tend to be the same. So for me in my career working in entrepreneurship, I have never done the same thing twice, right? I've been
Mm,
in more than 20 ventures over 5 decades. I've never done the same thing twice, but my ability to be able to transition from industry to industry seamlessly is in bringing someone in who is an expert in whatever industry I'm in at the time, right?
okay.
Because and that person understands the nuances of that industry. My area of expertise is in running businesses. So that other 99%, I'm good with that stuff, right? But there are going to be certain things about an industry that even something like I have an MBA in finance from the Wharton School of Business, the best finance school in the world, so I understand finance. But when you look at financials in one industry versus another, there are nuances even within financials, right? And so a lot of times I can look at something in normal circumstances, I might say that looks bad. But
Hmm.
someone who understands the industry might look at those same numbers and say, no, 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 that's not bad. That's actually normal because that's the expectation in this industry. And you need that input in order to be effective, right? If you want to forge a career like mine, where you have short attention span and you want to do something different every so often.
Well, let's be fair. I would say you're more of a serial entrepreneur than someone with a short attention span. And as a fellow serial entrepreneur, I get it.
Yeah.
I would say one of the things that I learned very early on was there is an overlap. And the process is the process, and very much what you said, there is the nuance that comes along with it, but overall, the process is the process, and it's one of those things where when you understand it, then you can identify where your strengths lie in it. So it's funny when I have conversations with people and they'll ask about services and things like that, and they're like, "Well, what industry you work in?" And it kinda lets me know who they've been having conversations with
Yeah.
because the more seasoned people that I know, it's not industry based. It's based on situational awareness and the things that are surrounding that industry. And
Mhm.
then you start to customize it, narrow it down once you figure out more about that person and what their situation is. So, absolutely. Okay, so if we were to say there's one pattern, what's one pattern you see often that you can predict that can help you predict the outcome? Because we see the patterns, we see different things. There are certain things that are universal, no matter what industry you're in. For me, I know that it normally starts with the people and their surrounding circumstances. But what would that look like for you? What's one pattern that you often see that predicts the outcome that you expect to see from someone?
Yeah. So when you walk into a conversation, you can talk, you can listen,
Hmm.
and so which tends to be the dominant trait that you possess. For me, it's listening, right? I enjoy talking, but when I'm interacting with other people, I prefer to listen because that's when you notice a lot of things, right? And you'd be surprised what people tend to tell you, when you give them an opportunity to talk. So I kind of go back to, I'll give you an example of my very first job out of college. I worked for Xerox in sales.
Hmm.
And then I'm 20 years old when this was going on. But I remember going into prospective customers building, and there was already someone from Xerox, a technical person there fixing a copying machine. And the customers are like all over this guy, just so friendly and, but they're treating me like a pariah, and that's when it hit me again. Fortunately, I learned a lot of really good lessons in life very early in life. But I had that happen more than one time. And it always made me think, I'm like, why would you treat a service person different than a salesperson? Right. And then it dawned on me that service people are there to help. Salespeople are there to sell.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're there to help, but that may not always be the case. And so that was their reaction to when people are getting help, they accept it, they receive that. But when people are trying to be sold to, they tend to repel from that. So what I was able to do with that knowledge and that insight was transition and become a better salesperson by learning how to incorporate service into selling. So,
Hmm.
you know, um, I always tell entrepreneurs sales is best done through service, right? What I learned was that, to not actually go into a customer and try to sell them something, to go in and try to discover what kind of problems they were having that they were having difficulty solving. And then once I understood what the problem was, and could come up with a solution, then it was, do I have something in my bag of tricks that I can potentially
Hmm.
bring to solve that problem? A lot of times I didn't, but in some cases I did. And when I did, it was, let me frame this for you. The reason I want to talk to you about this is because this is the problem you have. This is the solution. And here's how this particular product uh, addresses the solution for the problem you have. Uh, and here's the potential impact that it could create positively for your business. And as soon as I made that transition, the impact that people had to me or how they treated me was incredibly different. Right. I ended up getting fired from my sales job at Xerox because I didn't learn that lesson quick enough, but I learned it at Xerox, and then my second job was with AT&T. I became AT&T's top global salesperson my first year in the field because I was applying what I had learned at Xerox in
Hmm.
AT&T. So it's that, this always devolves into into human beings, and we're the hardest thing to try to master, which is why when you're able to master this, in interacting with other human beings, you're going to be much more successful than if you don't.
Got it.
But I think that the question that you asked was So what I see, the issue I see is not listening, and people not taking advice, right? So what ultimately ends up happening in an entrepreneurial setting is that more than likely is going to spiral into failure of a venture, right? Again, you start with that arrogance that hey, I know everything, I'm the best at whatever it is I do, and I don't want to listen, even though I might be getting great advice, and so that leads to failure. Hopefully, what you learn when and failure is part of the process, so it's not a bad thing. But hopefully, what you're learning as you're going through that process is, you know, even though I have to have a lot of confidence in myself because otherwise I won't be successful, I still need to listen because I don't have all the answers. And if I listen, you know, um, a lot of the advice I'm getting, I can incorporate into what I'm doing, and that's ultimately gonna make me more successful.
Got it. Well, let's unpack that and reframe it for the people that have less corporate experience and are trying to figure out how to apply it to themselves.
Mhm.
I'll approach it from the solutions architect and project and program manager roles that I've had. A lot of times I would go out with the salesperson, and the salesperson would go out and try to sell a product or the service that they knew they had and the ones that they wanted to be able to have sold. My job and one of the things that made me good at sales was I went in and I listened for what the problem was. And then I looked at what the product or service that I had and was able to say, do we have something that addresses this? Or do we not have something that addresses it? Because that level of honesty is something that will get you further into that actual conversation. And if we're talking about a way to be able to shorten the sales cycle, listening is the best way to be able to do that. And repeating back what you heard, because when someone says, well, this is what I'm struggling with, and then you can say, well, based on what you said, here's what I heard. And now here's the product or service that I have that I think will help address that problem. That builds a level of trust and it lets people know that you weren't just there to sell, you were actually there to address the problem, challenge, or struggle. So
Right.
that's what I heard in what you were saying. And
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of reframe it to an extent to say it's not just a good way of being able to identify how to be able to sell to someone, but it's a really good way of shortening the sales cycle.
Yeah.
Because when you can tell someone like, "Listen, I heard what you said. Here's what I heard," then they're gonna correct you if you missed anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that little teaser of, "Well, here's what I heard," and they're like, "Well, I mean, you got it, but you missed this part." Then you're getting them involved, and that's making them get into the conversation and makes them get more invested because they not only feel heard, but they knew you were actually listening, and they'll fill in the parts that you're missing, and then from there, it makes it easier for you to be able to move through the rest of that. That kind of goes into the follow up where I was going to say, when did you realize that you were advising people more than the industry or the product or service? So I think we've kind of answered that question where it's if you listen, people will tell you everything that you need to know. And you're not selling to the industry, you're not selling to the company, you're selling to the person who's telling you what the pain point is. And the really good people know how to be able to listen and say, okay, well, based on what you told me, here's what it is that I think that we can address.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, then
Yeah.
you're gonna be able to get further into that conversation. You'll shorten the sales cycle, and then you'll actually put yourself in a position where you can ask those follow-up questions. Uh, the last little bit that I'll say to that, and it goes into the next thing I want to follow up with is, um, it's there are a lot of people that wanna be the smartest ones in the room. That's not gonna close a deal for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't get to be the smart person until after you've identified that the person was smart enough to tell you what it is that they need help with, and then you can show them how smart you actually are. So, that's what I heard in what you were saying, and I wanna make sure that people fully understand that part, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a saying that when you walk into a room and you realize you're the smartest person, you need to leave the room and enter another room, right?
You're in the wrong room,
You
yeah.
you never want to be the smartest person in the room because when that happens, there's no room to learn, right? And when we stop learning, we start dying, right? So you want to constantly learn, no matter where you are and what you're doing. And so you want to put yourself into rooms where you feel uncomfortable because you are not the smartest person in the room with the most knowledge, but that's how you develop.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's transition into ego as a double-edged sword because we have said it, in entrepreneurship and in a lot of parts of life, you have to have irrational confidence because you'll have a whole bunch of people that want to tell you what you can't do. And you have to be able to tune that out to really focus in on what you know that you believe because it's your story, it's your goal, it's you that has to be able to achieve these things and you're responsible and accountable for it. but then it can also turn around and be your undoing. So confidence builds things, but ego can also break them. So
Yeah.
why is certain level of arrogance necessary to build something new? And then when does it become dangerous?
Yeah, yeah. So, and kind of the first part with the question itself, not saying anything about the question. I think it's a perfectly great question. But the word arrogance, I think too many people attach a negative connotation to that, and I don't think it has to have a negative connotation. It just is what it is, right? At the end of the day, you're not going to be successful in entrepreneurship if you don't believe in yourself, right? So there has to be a certain level of arrogance, not only because you have to believe in yourself in order to be successful, but there's a lot of, again, failure and rejection is part of the process. There's no overnight success in entrepreneurship. There's no
Mm,
the first time my first idea and I went out and immediately I became a millionaire. Doesn't happen, right? And if you read the books of every successful entrepreneur where they unpack what led them to success, you start to get the nitty gritty of the 10, 20, 30 years of struggle to get to,
mm,
but when they were struggling, no one wanted to talk to them, and that's why you didn't hear of them then. But once they, of course, make it, they're everyone's darling, and now we want to tell their story, and it just seems like, oh my god, well, I hadn't heard of this person yesterday, now I'm hearing about them today, and they're this wealthy, whatever,
mm.
and it's like, well, yesterday when they weren't wealthy, no one wanted to talk to them. That's why you didn't hear about them. So you didn't hear of all the struggle that led to their success, right? But so when you think about it, uh, and I think in a previous episode I talked about Kathy Hughes in Radio One
Yeah.
and being rejected like 35 times for a loan before she finally I think it was time 36 finally got a loan to buy her first radio station. Or Thomas Edison, coming up with 10,000 ways that wouldn't work, to create the light bulb, and finally 10,001, it worked. But if you think about that, for any normal human being, that amount of rejection is just going to kill someone if they don't have this trait of perseverance and persistence and self-love that can be translated to be arrogance, right? When other people see it, it's like, how if I'm looking at that person, I'm watching them go through all that failure and hearing all these no's, it's like, why do you still think so highly of yourself? Well, that's the only thing that's going to get you through that, right? So you just have to, and I mentioned this to people, fortunately, the first 11 years of my career were in sales, and
Mm,
you hear no all the time, every day, multiple times. And what you have to do is the only way to survive is to change the meaning of the word no in your brain to not today, right?
yes.
And so you're going to hear no, but your brain hears something else, and so now it's easier to get back up the next day and take your
Mhm.
shower, get dressed, and get in your car, go to the first customer, and go through a day of, again, you're probably going to hear no more than anything else, but you just know that every no leads you to every no is going to lead you to a yes, right? Eventually, and that's why you just keep plugging away. But again, everyone's not wired to be able to think that way, and when you can't, the probability of success in entrepreneurship is incredibly low, if not zero, right? Because you absolutely have to have that level of arrogance, that, not in a bad way, it's just arrogance that I have an idea, I think it's a great idea, I'm going to do everything that I can to make this idea succeed. I don't care how many no's I hear, how many failures I experience. I'm just going to keep plugging at it day in, day out until it works, because I know it'll work, right? And some people call that arrogance. Some people just call it flat out crazy. But I tell people, if you're an entrepreneur, embrace the word crazy too, because you have to be a little crazy. I mean, to do this. I mean, who would want to wake up every day and hear no 100 times a day? It's like, I mean, that can
True.
kill the ego. So no one's volunteering for that. But if you decide, hey, I'm gonna, I, I, I have a dream to achieve something, and I know that part the way to get to my dream is going to have to persevere through a lot of the rejection and a lot of the no's. I'm going to do it until I achieve whatever my vision or dream is. Right.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's so many things that I take away from that. One, arrogance to me is someone else's perception of that person's confidence.
Yeah.
So they may see it as arrogant of, oh, well, you believe like you're on to something, da 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 da. Whatever way they view it, it's their perception of someone's confidence. And when we're talking about irrational confidence, that's where it may be perceived as arrogance. But there's things that lead up to it. And what you've unpacked is a lot of times we'll see people that are successful, but what everyone else sees is the final iteration. They don't see the iterations that led up to it. So that's where you said there are a lot of people where nobody was talking to them. That those were the earlier iterations until they nailed the thing that they needed to say the way that they needed to say it and the timing and everything else that went along with it. To me, there's belief, there's confidence, there's irrational confidence. There's a lot of ways that are that we could describe it, but those are more internal because you know what led up to you feeling that way and having that belief in yourself, as opposed to how it could be perceived by other people because they don't see all the rest of the things that led up to it. I think where we're talking about arrogance where it can be dangerous is that it's where you believe you know better than other people, but you need the other people for your product or your service to be successful.
Right. Right.
That's where I would say arrogance kicks in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I believe what we're describing are the iterations, the
Yeah.
people that do the work leading
Yeah.
up to it to say, well, I didn't come up with this by myself. Yes, I came up with the idea, but I ran it by some people to make sure that I was on the right path. So when someone says you're just arrogant, you believe that you figured everything out, they're basing it on their perception. They're not basing it on the 10, 15, 20, 30, however many people that you may have spoken to that said, no, this is an idea. This is a good idea. This is something that you should bring to market. And that's where that confidence kicks in because you did your due diligence. So for me, I would say it's great to have that irrational confidence and belief in yourself. But then you validate it by doing soft launches and beta tests and things like that to be able to get other feedback to make sure that you're not operating with blind spots, but other people that don't get to see that work may see it as you being arrogant because they don't see the work that you put in. So if someone says, arrogant to me, I'm like, okay, like it may come across as arrogant because I
Yeah.
smirk
Yeah.
when someone to say something like that to me
Right.
because I'm like, you clearly don't know the level of work that I put into it. I have friends where they're like, oh, you just said that. And I'm like, you have no idea the level of overthinking that went into me making that simple comment. So I've got facts and things that I can back it up on. I've got experiences that I can reference. I'm just not giving you all the work because it's not a math problem. I'm not showing you all the work. I'm showing you the result because the result realistically is all most people care about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a difference. Let's look at it from the boundary standpoint. What's the line between conviction and delusion? Because we've talked about this in the past where we someone can have a great idea and the way that I kind of frame it is passion versus purpose. So there are some people that are very passionate about something and they believe in their convictions and everything else. But it may be delusional if they are trying to force something upon someone that wants to use it a different way. So I gave like the AI example where I said, okay, well, you've got a great product. Let's talk
Yeah.
about use case 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
He was very confident and believed in his convictions for the use case 1, but to not think that there were going to be use cases 2, 3, and 4, to me, was a little delusional. And that's why I highlighted that as a blind spot to go, it's inevitable whenever you have something that's really good that there's going to be someone that wants to see if they can use it a different.
Yeah. 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 And I think where, when it becomes delusional is
Mhm.
when you come up with an idea and you go out to get feedback because you want to validate your idea. And the process is, hey, let someone try this out, let someone listen to what your idea is, and then you listen to, their visceral reaction to what you just told them or what you just allowed them to experiment with. And so when you do those 2 steps and then they're giving you the feedback. Well, if you start to ignore their feedback, and again, which can be because of arrogance, and possibly it could be for some other reasons, but when you start to ignore this feedback, that's when it borderlines into delusion, particularly when you develop the mindset of, I think this will work. I know this is great. Okay, I'm gonna go out and get feedback. It's not what I want to hear, and I'm gonna press forward anyway. Right? If all the feedback you've gotten is particularly, and it's feedback from the right audience. The right audience is a prospective
That
customer.
part.
Right.
That part right there, yeah.
And so if you haven't been able to get one prospective customer to say, yeah, if you bring this to market, I'd actually buy this at a price point you're talking about selling it at, and you're going to continue moving forward without making any changes. That's delusion. And that's not why you go through the process. You go through the process to come up with a better solution, right? You may have an idea. You want to get validation. So you go out to the marketplace. You'll hear things. Hopefully, you'll hear some good, some bad. And it's what do you do with the bad stuff you hear? Well, what you should do is tweak your product or service, so that it addresses those things. I mean, it's great to get that feedback before you actually launch. It's easier to deal with it before you launch than after you launch, right?
Yes.
So you get that feedback, you modify the product or service, you go back to the customer again and say, okay, hey, because think about what this is telling the customer. I asked you for feedback. I heard you because I made modifications to my product or service based on what you told me. I want you to try it again to see if was I listening, and do my changes actually address your issue? So that's making your customer feel really good. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, this person actually, one, I think it's great that they took the time to reach out to me and ask for my feedback. But then the fact that they listened to me and made modifications based on what I told them, makes me even more willing to, now if this really solved my problem, I really want to buy from this person at this point, because this is someone that, if I'm dealing with anyone, regardless of what the product or service is, I'm a customer, a vendor that's listening to me and is going to make positive changes to the product or services they provide me to solve the problems I have, to make it easier to solve the problems I have. Those are the type of people I want to work with, right? So there's nothing negative that's going to come from that scenario, but not,
Yeah.
again, not going through that process or going through that process partially, getting that feedback, and it's like I don't want to hear that. I know this will work. Well, at the end of the day, you're starting a business to sell to a customer, and if a customer is telling you they're not going to buy the way your product or service is structured, the way it's currently structured, and you're unwilling to make any changes, it's delusional to think you're actually going to get a customer out of that scenario. You're not going to force something down someone's throat.
Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of things that I wanna circle back to in what you said because they're crucial parts to it. One, when you're having these conversations, you wanna make sure you're having it with your ideal customer.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you could be having a conversation with someone, and if you're just doing a broad survey, and I'm saying this as the guy that used to do surveys in the mall, I'm saying it as the guy that used to do the research on cold calls, and they would give me a list, and I would go through the survey questions, and the way that I was able to explain it to people, and this brings it back around to what you were saying, was this is something to make sure that they're seeing to you.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
where I would have these conversations, my thing is first I need to qualify if you're the right person. Like, are you someone I should be listening to your opinion on it? Because if you're not the ideal customer, then you're a use case 2, 3, and 4. But for the survey, they're trying to figure out this specific demographic, this specific type of person. So if you're getting negative feedback, one, check to make sure that you're having a conversation with the type of person that you want to be able to have as your customer, and you're not just doing a broad search. The other part to that is very much what you were talking about, and that's conveying the importance of I'm not just doing this for my own sake. I'm creating this to be able to solve a problem, challenge, or struggle that you're having. So your feedback matters to me because I can bring something to market.
Yeah,
If I'm a good enough salesperson, somebody's going to buy it. But again, that goes back to the irrational confidence. But
yeah, yeah,
somebody's going to be able to buy it, but the reality is it going to be the person that you really want buying it?
yeah,
So I need to be able to get this feedback because I'm saying I want you as the customer, not some random person that will buy just to be able to test it out, but I want you as the customer. So I need your feedback so that I can come up with the iterations to be able to tweak it. So the negative feedback is not negative. In my mind, it's iterations that allow me to be able to get the thing the way that I need to be able to have it. So when I go to market, it's not, I still have to figure things out. I have to tweak this, I have to tweak that. I listened to what you said and I recreated it or I fine tuned it to be able to address specifically you. And then once you get that person, then that's your brand champion. And then you can start looking at being able to scale everything from there. So yeah, from someone that used to do the research in the mall and do you have time for a survey? The way that I would win people over, and nobody really wants to do those things. And I knew that, but I was a kid. I needed to get a car. I was in California, and the only way I was going to be able to get that car was doing that or doing some other things that those weren't going to be above board.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
I'm going to focus over here. And yeah, I had close rates. And I realized very quickly reading the room, going back to the whole point of this conversation is reading the room. I had to read the room and understand, like, okay, well, who do I think is going to be the ideal customer for this brand?
yeah,
And
yeah,
then once I figured out who I thought that ideal customer was, then it was okay. I can ask the question. They gave me a series of questions. What I realized is sometimes the series that they gave me and the order they wanted them in wasn't the order that I needed to be able to ask them in. Sometimes I needed to lead with, okay, I'll give you an example. There was a young lady I used to see go in the mall with her friends. Both of us were tall. And she would go in with her friends, and the friends were able to go into any store and be able to buy whatever they wanted. And she would come back out, and they had a bunch of bags, and she had the same look on her face that I used to have on my face. Where I'm like, I can go in and get T-shirts, but
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to go shopping with my friends because none of the stuff that the stores they want to go to, none of the stuff is going to fit me.
yeah, yeah,
So I saw her doing it day after day after day. And then finally, one time I stopped her and I said, you know what? Let me talk to you when you come back out of the store. And when she came back out, she had that same look on her face. And I was like, here's the survey that I'm actually running. This is a brand, and this brand is trying to figure out how to service more customers. One of the feedback that you could give them is, I'm tired of going into stores and not having people have my size. You're marketing to all of these other people, but I would actually pay more to be able to have some to know that there's stores that I can go into that are going to have my size. The result of that, and I mean, this is going to date it back, but this is where we started going into big and tall stores because that feedback that I was able to gather, I went back to the brands and said, here's the questions that you told me to ask. Here's what I'm really seeing is as something that you can have. This is a lane that you can operate in, and this is going to be able to help you get more. So it's being able to go back to someone again and talk about the use cases and be able to say, you were looking at use case one, here's two, three, and four. That young lady, she would go into the store and she can never find her size.
yeah, yeah,
Once she was able to get that feedback, give that feedback, or once I was able to convey, if you tell them that you would actually pay more for someone to actually pay a little bit, like is more material, I
yeah,
understand I'm gonna have to pay more.
yeah.
And it's for both taller and shorter people. It's if you know that you're on the outlier, you're gonna end up paying more for it. But when people feel heard in those situations, they become more loyal. So I'm bringing all of that back around to be able to say, I figure out who your ideal audience is, who you want as a customer, and then gather the feedback from them. And if you're getting negative feedback and it's nobody that you think that you want as a customer is giving you that feedback, then that's when you have to start thinking through what product or service that you're trying to bring to market. But if you're getting a mixed bag, then that's where you dig in a little bit more and you start to figure out, okay, well, if these people are saying they don't like it and these people are saying that they do like it, then the follow-up question is, okay, so let me start looking at the people that say they do like it. Why do you like it? And then you start looking at the people that say they don't like it. Well, if I was to make this type of change, what would that do for you? How quickly would you be willing to buy? How much would you prioritize it? Those are the follow up questions that you start to ask. And that's what gets you the iterations that allow you to be able to move forward. So, bit of a rant, but like, yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
felt
yeah.
triggered for a second thinking back about those types of questions and understanding it's rough, especially when you first start your business. You're trying to figure things out, and then there's the experts that'll tell you you're doing it the wrong way. But is it that you're doing it the wrong way, or is it they only know how to do it one way? And you have to be able to learn who to listen to and have a certain level of discernment. And it's not just for the experts, but it's also for the audience. So make sure that you're asking the follow up questions from the people that you're getting the information from. Is this someone that I want as a customer, and is this someone that is telling me something because they only know how to do it one way? When I potentially don't want to be that person. I want to be my version of what that person is. So if you use those two things from the expert opinion and then the audience, that'll help you get where you want to be able to go.
So you talked to you'd said survey your target audience, and I don't disagree with that, but I would actually tell entrepreneurs you'll come up with a better product or service solution when you actually expand who you're asking, because you
Yeah,
can get
yeah.
great feedback from people you don't think would they won't be in your target audience, but I'll just use the example of children, right?
Mm.
So asking children things now you have to meet them where they are. So yeah, they have to understand what you're talking about. You have to explain whatever, I always like to explain things like I'm talking to a 5-year-old, but because people ask you to elevate the conversation if you're talking, beneath their, their level of understanding. But children have this. It's the why thing
Mhm.
where you ask them a question and it's why,
I
why,
was one of those kids,
why,
yes, absolutely,
why.
yeah.
The beauty of that, though, is as annoying as that might seem to an adult, is sometimes, and again, you have to you have to bring them to a level of understanding where they really understand your product or service. But when they're asking those why questions, actually those iterations of why, because the average adult's not going to ask you that stuff, and but that stuff actually drives you to create a better product or service.
It
Because
can,
kids
yeah.
will, they don't have any of the jading that adults have, and so they might legitimately ask a question why about something where an adult will say, "Oh, I think that's stupid. That's why I'm not going to ask that." But a kid's not going to they don't think that way. They're just gonna ask
Yeah, they
why,
don't have that
and
filter,
that
yeah.
could be a great, "Oh my god, I didn't even think of that," you know, and I could tweak, my product or service based on that because that's actually a really good question. I wonder why I'm thinking that way, and maybe I shouldn't be thinking that way, and so I would expand a little bit when you're going through this vetting and trying to get customer buy-in, who you talk to for feedback, because you can get great feedback from a variety of sources.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I won't touch that at all because I am in agreement. I believe that depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about readiness. Great advice fails all the time, not because it's wrong. Sometimes it's just trying to figure out the readiness and having the right conversation with the right person at the right time. So, how do you know when someone isn't rejecting your advice? They're just not ready to hear it.
And it's I don't know if there's any particular sign that you can look for other than, you advising someone, giving them, kind of homework, and them coming back and actually having done the homework and taking it seriously, right? So you'll know based on your interaction in that second meeting, how seriously they took your advice and what they've attempted to do with that advice. And then you'll be able to assess, does this person really understand that they need help and do they want to make a change, right? But outside of that, I don't think you can just look at someone and I don't know if there's anything you would be able to notice before you kind of knew someone to say this person's actually ready for help. And in a lot of cases, you need to fail. There's nothing wrong with failure. Sometimes people need to fail. So I'll go back to in my sales days, my second job was with AT&T. So I got hired at a time when the phone companies were being divested, and they were about to face competition. There were a bunch of companies that the federal government said, "Okay, we're going to allow you to compete against AT&T."
Mhm.
So AT&T actually started looking for companies who had renowned sales programs and started rating these companies for their sales staff. That's how I ended up
Mhm.
getting a job at AT&T. Xerox, is founded on spin selling, which is a consultative selling technique. And I worked for Xerox and I got recruited to come to AT&T. But when I started working with AT&T and started realizing that, I'm selling long distance service or, well, I'll particularly look at long distance service. I realized that looking at the history of the telephone system, that the entire network in the country at the time, AT&T owned, right? So they were allowing companies like Sprint and MCI to enter the marketplace, but they had to use AT&T's network, right?
They're satellites, yeah.
Yeah. So what they would do is they would say they would they were building local networks, and they would say, okay, well, you'll be able to make, and they were cherry picking. So they would say, hey, if you're making calls from New York to LA, you know, your calls are going to be 1 cent a minute, but in AT&T, it's 10 cents a minute. Well, so there's a couple of things there. Well, most people don't only call from New York to LA. So yes, you might save 9 cents a minute on your calls from New York to LA. But if you're calling the rest of the country, you might not be saving on any of those calls, right? And
I remember these conversations, yes,
yeah,
I was yeah.
and actually for those calls, now if you switch, you're going to be paying more. So what you really needed to do is look at your overall bill. You know, where do I actually make phone calls? And so which of these phone calls would be discounted, which would be increased in price, and what does that do to my overall bill? And I realized that in a lot of cases, even though they were, customers were being sold that your bill would go down dramatically, in a lot of cases, the bill would actually go up. And
Yeah,
so,
that's the other shoe.
yeah, so
That's the other shoe in
I
those
had a tactic
situations.
of I'm going to explain to you how to break this down so you can really compare apples to apples. But if you decided, hey, for whatever reason, I want to try MCI or Sprint, I would let customers, okay, I'm not going to fight you. Go ahead. I'll come back in 30 or 60 days and I want
Mhm.
to look at your bills from this new carrier versus your old bills. And you tell me, are you actually saving money like they said you would save money? And in a lot of cases, they weren't. And so what would end up happening was in every case, those customers came back to me. And now the dynamic was, Jeff, you have tried to explain this to me. I wasn't listening. But now I've had experience on the other side, and I realized what you were telling me was true. And now I'm never going to leave you again because, I have this level of trust in you that I didn't have before. And now that I have that level of trust in you, you know, that's the relationship I want to have with you going forward indefinitely. Yeah. Uh, when you're dealing with this type of information, that's in business, sometimes people have to fail. You have to allow them to fail. And by failing, they realize that, hey, the advice you were giving me up front was the right advice. I wasn't listening. And the result of me not listening was I failed. And so now that I failed and I've started over again, you know, realizing that you were actually giving me great advice all along, I'm going to listen to you in a way I wasn't listening before. Right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one, I can specifically remember those times.
Yeah.
And I know those conversations because I remember being part of those conversations. And then also it's also understanding the process and understanding your competitors and understanding the market well enough to be able to know. I knew if someone was saying, "Oh, well, you can call California if you're in New York." Is that the only place you're gonna call? How long does it normally take for someone to call someplace else and then start to see that, yeah, you're saving on calling to California, but the moment you call someplace else, it could be that 60 days, it could be that 90 days. I'm gonna bring it back to the people at a very early stage so that they can understand within what you're talking about, you're building the relationship so that they remember you well enough to come back when things go wrong. That's the missing piece. I don't want that to be a blind spot for some people. You're good enough at what you're doing that you understood the market, and then you also understood how to be able to be memorable to that person. So when things went wrong, they could say, "Oh, let me go back to Jeff who was telling me the right."
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not just letting people fail, it's understanding how they're gonna fail, when they're gonna fail, where they're gonna fail. It's
Yeah.
all the extra things that you knew within that to be able to go, I can afford to let you do what it is that you're doing. And that's where people that are more experienced and more seasoned will give cautionary tales. They'll give predictive stories. They'll lay things out so that they're planting the seeds so that people can say, you know what? In that moment of shame, the thing that can bring them back from that shame is you did tell me about this and you warned me about it. And you said, when that happens, and that's the CTA in it, that's the click through of when this happens, you're welcome to be able to come back and we'll be able to figure out how to be able to get this right for you. But I don't want people to miss that part. And the thing that sometimes people hear in that is, oh, well, that means I can do it. No, Jeff is doing it because Jeff understood the market and the process and everything well enough to be able to go, I know what I'm looking at. I know why I'm looking at it. I know when is there's the other parts to it that you want to be able to build up that muscle. You didn't just say, I'm just going to let them go. You looked at the market and understood it well enough to be able to understand that. That's why I'm smiling because I distinctly remember those conversations. Sometimes there's new stuff, but within those new things, you have to be able to deal with the learning curve that comes along with it, and normally there's something that they may not be telling you. And I think that's one of the catches to semantic selling. And we see a lot of that now where people will tell you things based on, well, I mean, they can flip the context. They can tell you all the things that make it sound great, but they're leaving out the things that aren't that are the details that might actually matter to you. So I can help you make 6K in a month. Okay. What's all the other stuff that you're not telling me? All the other context is missing. It tells me what I have to be, where I have to be in order for you to help me be able to do that. So I don't want that part to get lost because there's people out there that listen for the easy button and it may sound easy and then they'll let some people go and they go, well, how come they didn't come back? They didn't come back because you didn't do the initial work that you needed to be able to do. They weren't Jeff that was able to be smart enough to go, I'm going to look at, what these people are promising. I'm going to figure out when it is most likely going to kick in that people realize what it actually is. And I'm going to make myself memorable enough so that when things don't go well, they'll not only remember me, but I'm going to close with, and when that happens, I want you to
Yeah.
know that you can come back.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want you to add that part into whatever it is that you're doing when you hear these conversations, because that's the real sales. And that's not just sales, that's people that are salespeople, but are also account managers. Because a salesperson can sell you, an account manager is the one that's going to have to be there when things don't go well. And that's someone that knows both sides of it. And that's where I think you might have been selling yourself short in the story, because I know what I heard in that. I know
Yeah.
my experience in that. And
Yeah.
I know how many times I'll have conversations with people and that context is missing when they, oh, I spoke to so and so and they said that I can do this and I can do that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a predictive story. I'm going to say, based on what you're telling me, here's what normally happens in this type of situation. When you put yourself on that pathway, here's some of the things that you'll start to be able to see. I'm going to tell you a couple of different signs for you to look out for, because once you see it once, by the time you see it the next time, it's already a pattern. And if you're not comfortable with that pattern or being on that pathway, come on back over when you figure out that that's not something that you really want to have, or that's not the situation that you want to be in. Readiness is one of those things of, I am in a complete agreement. Sometimes you have to let people fail, but you also have to set up that failure in order to make it so that when they fail, they know they have a home to come back to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the key part for what you were saying. And it's in what you're saying. I just want to make sure people are hearing it.
Yeah, and it's that, I'd said a little bit earlier, translating the word no into not today. It's
Yeah,
kind of that concept of, no,
exactly.
no, no might mean you have an existing customer who leaves you, right? So you're coming back, hey, would you like to renew or did it? No. Okay, wow. What are you doing? I'm going somewhere else, right? I'm going to your competitor. Well, it's you hope they come back to you, but one of the ways you do that is by checking in on them periodically. So now they're no longer your customer, and 3 months later, you checked in with them, and in their mind, it's like, "Well, why are you talking to me? I'm not your customer anymore."
Mm,
Because I care, right? You left for a reason, and I wanna ensure that you got what you thought you were gonna get. And if not, I just want you to know that I would love to have your business again, right? So sometimes it's, staying in touch because the world changes, right?
mhm.
And, the world's dynamically changing on a daily basis. And what thrust your customer to make the decision to leave you today might the circumstances might be dramatically different a week from today, a month from today, 3 months from today, 6 months from today. And if you're constantly checking in, maybe you get to them at the absolute right time where they're like, "Hey, I made a bad decision. I'm really frustrated. I need to make a change. Jeff's at my doorstep. You know, let me go back to Jeff."
Yeah. That's why I'm a big fan of situational awareness. I want to know what the surrounding circumstances are, because that's what's really driving your decision. And if it's something where it's like, listen, I got to scale back on bills because my kid's getting ready to go to college, or this is happening, or that's happening. When you're aware of those things, you realize that there's a time frame that those things are going to be issues that are prioritized. And once they get over that issue, then that obstacle is no longer really there. So that's one of those things where this is why it's so important to be able to understand the surrounding circumstances and situational awareness to understand what it is that you're looking at and what it is that you're hearing. One of the follow-up questions I was going to ask, and we've touched on it, but this is an opportunity to be able to go further into it, is, can readiness be accelerated or does experience force it? So we talked about consequences. Consequences force those types of things. And then there's the, how do we accelerate it for the people that want to avoid going through those consequences? One of the things I'll joke with people and say, you know what, there's one thing that you can always count on, and that's rock bottom.
Yeah, yeah,
So, if you want to wait on that, if you want to go through that, my job is two things. I can either help you with preventative measures or reactionary solutions. I can help you avoid it before it becomes a problem, or I can be there when it actually happens. What really comes down to is, can you afford to fail?
yeah,
So
yeah,
for me, if I'm trying to accelerate it, one of the things that I'm looking at is, how important is this to you? And what happens if this doesn't go the way that you want it to be able to go? What's it going to cost you? Because when I can answer that question that way, then it gives me an opportunity to be able to decide, is this something where I can wait for them to have that experience, or do I need to start looking at what story to tell them? So storyteller. And that's where I decide which story am I going to give them. Is it a predictive story? Is it a cautionary tale? Am I making them the hero? All of those different things factor into that for me. But for you, when you're looking at readiness be accelerated, or is it experience that's going to force that decision? What are some of the things that you're looking at?
Yeah, yeah. So the answer to the question is yes, to both, right? Readiness can be accelerated and experience is going to force it, right? So
Hmm.
I think as an entrepreneur, you've got to figure out which, if both of these can happen, which what I prefer to happen and how do I orchestrate what I want to have happen, right? So I think you want to be on the side of, I mean, the experience forcing it kind of I read into that you have less control, right? Right. So it's just the circumstances that you're being thrust into and trying to react to, which
Dictating it,
when you
yeah.
react, you tend not to have as great of an outcome as if you drive what you're doing. So I would say the first part of that is to control what happens and to try to accelerate it because by accelerating it, and that's all about planning, right?
Hmm.
So if you're planning in advance, you're going to accelerate decision making. You're going to accelerate circumstances, and you'll have ways to you're building in that muscle memory we talked about in the past of being able to react when circumstances happen. So I would rather be in I want to control my fate if I can. We can't always control our fate, but if I can control most of what happens to me, I'm in a better position than if I'm just reacting to everything that's happening, right? So,
Hmm.
yeah. And I don't know if
Okay.
I
Well,
answered your question, but
no, you did. I mean, the whole point to it is exactly that. It's know that I want to control the things that I can control.
yeah,
And that's really what the question is. Are you willing to take the preventative measures and say, I want to get out ahead of something that could potentially go wrong? Or are
yeah,
you someone that says, I'll deal with that when I get to it?
yeah,
And there's a joke where I normally post different things on LinkedIn. I have something where I take these cartoons and different things, and I'll post like an image. And there's an image of a bridge that's all collapsed, but it's this is the bridge you said you would cross when you got to it.
yeah, yeah,
And it was just a reminder that people, oh, I'll deal with that later. And then when it gets there, then it's like, oh, and then that's when the consequences and the costs start to kick in. So there are some
right,
people that are thinking about that leading up
yeah,
to it.
yeah,
And then there is some people that say, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. And then you just got to hope that the bridge is there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if not, then you're probably going to pay a premium
yeah,
because that's when someone can say, okay, well, now you really need it and I can afford to charge you more. It's my the way my brain works is I'd rather do it when I can get it done at a more
yeah,
affordable thing by getting out
yeah,
ahead of it
yeah,
than it being something that I have to wait and deal with on the back end. It's
right,
almost like healthcare.
yeah,
And anyone that's worked with healthcare, you can either go to the gym or you can pay the doctor visits and
yeah,
all the
yeah,
rest of that to go in and deal with all the extra costs that come with because you put that off. So for me, I kind of remind myself in those situations, and I'm like, could I deal with it later? How much is it going to cost me to deal with it later?
yeah,
I remember the debate days, and sometimes the debate days, the person that went second was the one that got the better leverage because they listened
yeah,
to everything that that person was saying.
yeah,
And then they were able to go, yeah, I know what I was going to say, but they said this and that left an opening, and there's this and there's that. So we're talking about the importance of listening. It's not just listening, it's knowing what to listen for. So
yeah, yeah,
one of the things that I was going to ask is how much of this is instinct versus trained awareness? Some people I know they just naturally come by it and it's just a natural ability. But I do believe that it's something that can be a learned ability where you just learn what to start listening for. And then once you know what you're listening for, then you start to learn the timing of when to be able to step in. How much of it are you seeing as instinct versus someone that's actually can be trained to be that aware of what to listen for and when to chime in?
yeah. I mean, it's probably 50-50 to be perfectly honest with you, because you absolutely can be trained to know what to listen for and how to respond. But then there's also, there's instinct. I'll just call it common sense, right? And I'll go back to the, the example with the professional basketball player. The reason he hired me out of grad school. So I had an experience where the summer before, I was doing technical consulting work in a relatively rough area of Philadelphia, and where I was going to grad school. And I had a client who owned a marketing business, or I'm sorry, had a construction business. I was doing a marketing plan for him that summer, and so my third semester, I went to the Netherlands to study. for a semester
Mhm.
and then come back. And so for my final semester, I'm back on campus, and I decided to stop back into the office that I had interned at on campus, just to say hi to, all the employees. And so when I saw my former manager, he pulled me aside. He says, "Oh my God, I've been looking for you." He says, "I think I have an opportunity for you." And I
Okay.
said, "Oh, okay." And so he said, one of your former clients has a project, and it's looking to buy a company and in the Midwest, and so they need someone to do some analysis. So I said, "Okay." And he said, "So let's set up a meeting with your former client and and see what happens." So met with my former client. He went through the meeting. I'm looking at the information. He had given me the information in advance. So I had prepared a presentation, made my presentation to my former client. He's like, "Oh, this is really good. I'm gonna actually introduce you to, the person who is thinking about buying this company."
Mhm.
And so athlete was living in Philadelphia at the time, and I went to his home, and I'm making the presentation to him, my same presentation. Well, he stops me 15 minutes into my presentation. I've heard enough. I'm like, okay, I don't know whether to take this as good or bad. He says, "How would you like to run this company?"
Mm.
And I said, "Well, I'm still a student. I don't graduate until, there's probably meeting with him in February of the year." I said, "I graduate in May. I'm in my last semester." "Yeah, I know. But how would you like to run the company?" And at this point, I'm assuming that, because when I work with people, I joke a lot, and I'm like, okay, I'm on candid camera being punked, depending on your age and which
Mhm.
of the shows you relate to.
I'm
And
familiar with both,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
So I'm like, let me just go along with this. So I said, "Oh, I'd love to run the company," and we just pivot to talking about sports. So I leave, I go back to campus. I've pretty much forgotten about the meeting. A couple weeks later, I get a one-way plane ticket to the city in the Midwest. I'm like, they were serious.
Yeah.
So when I finally get out there, the first time we have a company meeting, I'm talking to his executive assistant, and she pulls me aside. She says, "Let me tell you why you got hired." I said, "Okay, what happened?" She says, "So you know the analysis that you did?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, that same proposal was given to your former client." "Okay, well, he did an analysis. He didn't tell you that, did he?" I said, "No, no, he didn't tell me that." He said, "And then this athlete knew a president at JP Morgan." And he said, he gave the proposal to this president of JP Morgan, asked him to do an analysis, which he did. He said, "So the three of you did the same analysis using the same data." He
Mhm.
said, "You did something neither of those other two people did." I said, "Well, what was that?" He said, "So," and what I had done was, because the company was in trouble. And
Mhm.
so the first instinct, if you're just looking at raw data, was to say, "Don't buy this company," because it wasn't a good acquisition
It's taking a
on
loss, yeah.
paper. Right. But what I did was I took it a step further and I said, "But if you decided to buy the company," I didn't know I didn't know any of the circumstances, but I said, "If you decided to buy the company, here's how you mitigate that risk and get your money back."
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and that's the step that no one else did. And so, so sometimes you have to take these things a step further and think outside the box, and
Well,
that's what ultimately can make you
let's
successful.
unpack that a little bit more because, again, I feel like you're selling yourself short. And
Yeah,
I don't allow people to do that in my presence
yeah, yeah,
because I'm always willing to give people their flowers. They already made the idea, like, they wouldn't have been looking into buying the company if they didn't feel like if there was something there. So you complimented their instincts by being able to follow up and say, but if you do, a lot of people are just going to look at the loss and go, well, you know what? It's not a layup. So like, it's not worth your time. Showing someone how to be able to plug a hole is how to be able to show I know how to do something more than one way. So if two people said, well, I mean, it's not worth your time, but you went the extra measure to be able to say, well, I mean, here's how you fix it.
yeah.
Someone that knows how to fix something that goes wrong knows how to be able to catch it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you were valuable in two different ways. One, you showed him how to be able to acquire something that was going to give him a gain by fixing what the problem was and
Mhm.
identifying it and being able to say, well, here's how you can fix it. But then you also showed him that this is something it's a skill set that I have, that if I can identify it in a company that's already gone wrong, then I can probably identify it in a company that isn't making those mistakes, but I can highlight those blind spots. And that kind
Yeah.
of goes back to what we were talking about with the corporate experience of I know how much I got paid to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the difference between the corporate side or the larger companies versus the smaller companies in entrepreneurship is we have to solve the first problem for them first
Yeah. Yeah.
before they can see further down the road. If we don't move that initial obstacle, then they don't have the rest of the path that they can look at. So it depends on the size of the company or the size of the opportunity. But what I heard in what you broke down was this was someone that had already trusted their instincts enough to go, I feel like there's something there. And you validated that. And you validated by saying, yeah, no, there is something there. I mean, it's a risk,
Yeah.
but here's how you mitigate that risk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was something that made you endearing to that person because not only did you do that, but you were young enough to be able to do it, where they said, you know what, I can bring you in and everything that you learn and everything that this experience gives you is only going to make you better. And you already proved yourself to be better than the people that took half measures, I guess would be a
Yeah.
way to look at it.
Yeah. 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 I
So
mean,
yeah,
what ended up, so the backstory, which didn't get told to any of us, was that the owner of the company in the Midwest had a long-term friendship with this athlete.
there you go.
And so
There
the
you go.
commitment to buy the company had already been made, right?
There you go.
But the company was legitimately struggling. And so because the commitment had already been made, what the advice that the athlete was really looking for was, knowing that I'm going to make this investment, how do I protect my investment and get a return on my investment, right? And so what I did analyzing this was I'm like, well, let me look at this from straight business. Is this a good acquisition or not? And the answer was no. But then I took it a step further was, yeah, but what if not? And I didn't know there's anything
Didn't
about
have the additional context, but yeah,
but I just took my brain took it a step further and said, but what if you did decide to buy the company? How would you protect your investment and get your return, right? And so it's like I did that analysis as well, and that's at the end of the day exactly what was being looked for.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's the difference between someone that will give you a surface level answer and someone that is going to customize something to your situation. I am more of a I want to customize it to that person's situation. That's why I want to know the surrounding circumstances. Because once you tell me, well, this is why I'm invested in it or this is why I'm interested in it, then it's like, okay, well then I know that those extra measures are necessary. But if you just assume that it's like, top level, is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Is it risk or is it risky or is it not risky? You miss the context, and that context is always going to matter. So I think that's one of the things that I want people to be able to take away from it is this is where it's instinct, but it's also trained awareness. Your instincts told you to look into it, and that instinct has turned into trained awareness that you can lean back on and you can use as a frame of reference. Anytime you find yourself remotely in that situation, you have that to fall back on and go, you know what? When I trusted my instincts before, it got me these results. And that
Yeah,
can be in the best and worst ways. Sometimes,
yeah,
I bet on some things that didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, but I learned my lesson from it. And I was able to go, okay, my instincts told me this. What did I miss? There was this blind spot. And because I didn't pay attention to that blind spot, I missed the context. Now I know whenever I have conversations like that, what I want is the context.
yeah,
Well, why are you asking me all these questions? Because
yeah.
there's something in this that you may not be thinking is important, but it's going to be important in me coming up with a solution that's going to be able to help you.
Right, right.
And I think that's the difference between, dare I say, book learned versus lived experience. Book learned is going to show you how to be able to do it one way. It's going to give you the perfect scenario. But context is from lived experience. And it's enough to be able to say, okay, based on my experiences, based on the things that I've seen, it may not be the exact same thing, but I have enough of a frame of reference to be able to say, there's more to this. Let me find out what the more to it is. And before I come up with any kind of solution or anything like that, let me get that context because that may change what my answer is. That's what I heard in what you were saying and why I said, yeah, I mean, we're not just talking about who you are now. We're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about who you were then. And it's the old soul of you already there. So when we're talking about is it something where it's instinct versus trained, Your instincts told you to take those extra steps. And now you know to be able to do it because you've got that as a frame of reference. So for the people that don't have that natural instinct, it's something that you can learn how to be able to do, but always, always, always look for the additional context.
Yeah. Well, and you do have an instinct. That's no matter who you are, because that's what makes us unique as human beings. So when it so an example I always use with people is I'll say I'll talk about you can go buy a book that Bill Gates wrote about how he created Microsoft, and you can take the foundational elements of what he did and then try to implement them in your business, and it won't work. The reason it won't work is you're not Bill Gates. It's not that those foundational stepping stones are wrong. They're right. But you have to do is you have to customize it to you.
Yes.
So your unique instincts, when you customize it to your unique instincts, then you'll make it work. But if you try to do something the way someone else did it, you not being them, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that pretty much sums up why as much as people say, oh, well, AI is going to replace us, it can only do but so much.
Yeah,
It'll get there at some point, but it's
right.
basing it on past experiences and saying in a perfect scenario, you do this. The extra context is something that lived experience and people that have that know to get the extra context is garbage in, garbage out. If you don't give it everything that it needs, it's not going to give you everything that you need. So I love the fact that you are saying, yes, you have to be able to look into that. Okay. Well, I mean, now I bring it back around to the promise and say, if you've ever made a decision that looked right on paper but felt wrong later, this episode is for you because most business mistakes aren't math problems, they are people problems. And today we're talking about how ego, timing, psychology, and human nature quietly drive the decision that either builds what you're creating or it can slowly undermine. Hopefully, we were able to give you enough examples of what that looks like. We've talked about arrogance. We've talked about how it can be perceived one way, but it's actually something else because there's iterations and things behind it. We've covered it from a lot of different angles. I want to bring it back around to because we've given them a lot of different contexts. I want to bring it back around to the one thing. So, if someone wants better outcomes in business, where should they start? Strategy or self awareness?
Ooh, wow.
Right?
Where would they start? I'm leaning towards self-awareness, to be perfectly honest with you,
Yes.
because if you once you're self-aware, then I mean you need both. But
Mm.
once you're self-aware, you'll be able to absorb the strategy, right? So if you get the strategy and you're not self-aware, it's kind of where we talked earlier about someone that needs reform that isn't aware that they need reform in their own mind. It's not going to take. So that's where I think with these two issues it works. You need to that self-awareness needs to happen first, and then I think you're open to learning the strategy. You need both, right? But obviously one has to happen before the other. And so if that's the scenario, I would opt for the self awareness piece so that you're open to learning the strategy as it's being taught to you.
Yeah, in a way, it was a trick question because we've had enough conversations where I'm like,
Yeah,
I already know what the answer is going to be from you, and it's why I said yeah as soon as you said it to go.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I knew that's what because it really comes down to situational awareness is going to be something where, excuse me, not even situational, self awareness. Self awareness is the thing that's going to allow you to be able to have the discernment necessary to know which strategy and tactics actually make sense for you because there are a lot of people and there's a lot of noise out there. But if you're not self aware of what your situation is, then you can try something and it's not a good fit for you. It's like you said with you can buy Bill Gates' book. But if you don't have Bill Gates' surrounding circumstances, then
mhm,
it may not be something that's going to work for you. If you don't have the
yeah,
self awareness to be able to say, I don't have all of those factors, all of those pieces aren't falling in place the same way it would for me, you can get pretty far down the road. And it could take a while for you to realize, you know what? Yeah, that wasn't the best idea for me. So
yeah, yeah,
I look at not just self-awareness, but situational awareness. I think it's important to be self-aware of who you are.
mhm,
And that's why at one point I rolled out the 10 types of entrepreneurs. It's not just based on the industry, it's based on your personality.
yeah,
But then there's also situational awareness to be able to say you have to think about all the other factors that are going on around you because whatever's going on in our personal life will affect our professional decisions. Whatever's going on in the world will affect our professional decisions. If you don't take all of those things into consideration, you're basing something on something that may be momentary. So there are some people that may go out and say, well, I'm doing this because I need to make more money because my partner, my wife got laid off or something like that. Okay, well, what
Yeah.
happens when they get a job again?
Right.
And you're so ingrained in what you're doing that you can't scale back. And now they need you to start taking on more of the things in the personal life because now they're back at work. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to take a look at not just what your situation is, but is this a permanent situation or is this something that can change? Because if you know it's something that can evolve, then you also want to bake that into the decisions that you're making. And again, you have to be self-aware enough to be able to do that. So I live under the guidelines of it depends. And whenever I hear someone say something like it's an absolute or it's just a sweeping thing, I'm going, that's very, very dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially on social media, I see a lot of that where they're like, oh, all guys do this. And I'm like, you lost me as soon as you said all guys. All women do. As soon as you start painting with a broad stroke, I'm
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
lost me because we're all individuals. Our experiences will dictate the things that we run into. So, yeah. I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer because you'll eventually get where you want to be able to go. But if you're trying to expedite it and you're trying to do it without going through the mud, be aware of your situation. Be honest about it. Yes, you can have the irrational confidence. Yes, you can have the ego and say, well, I know that I can do this and all the rest of that. But being self-aware enough to be able to say, am I building myself up and telling myself not to listen to other people? Or am I building myself up to prepare myself to listen to other people? And those are two different types of things. So thank you, because I say it all the time, but I needed to hear it come from someone else to be able to validate it. Again, that goes back to when you hear other people doing the same thing, it validates where you're at. So I want people to get that as a takeaway. Be aware of what your situation is. Don't just run and jump on a strategy or a tactic because you see it's working for someone else. It's working for someone else, but you don't have the context as to why it's working for that person. And you don't it's I don't want to go on a rant, but it's almost like going into the gym and someone wants to like I could be on the treadmill and somebody wants to come right next to me and start looking at what I'm doing so that they can measure what they're doing. I'm like, but I have different you have no idea what my goals are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
just be coming in to get, this could be a warm up for me and this could be your whole workout. So
Right.
like
Right. Right.
you
Yeah.
have to have that context to really be able to understand what you're comparing yourself against. So when you hear someone say something, ask the follow-up questions, maybe not of them, but of yourself so that you can figure out, is that someone that I really want to be able to listen to? Am I comparing myself based on my ego saying, well, if they can do it, I can do it? Or is there really enough overlap for me to say that's why I should be trying to emulate what that person did? Yeah. Well, here's a bonus because you just said something that triggered something for me. The consultations where people get on and they try to pick your brain, but I'm gonna get all these answers in this one call.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds
Don't
good.
don't don't whatever it is that you think that you're getting, you're only getting the tip of the iceberg.
Right. Right. Right.
Because it's very rare that you're gonna be able to get on a call and within whatever consultation time that someone gives you, that you're gonna be able to provide them with enough context for them to be able to give you the actual answer that you need. Even with AI, sometimes, like, you can use it, and it can take you a few different responses to be able to get to a point. The follow-up that I tell people is don't just take the point that it gives you when you finally get there. Ask it the follow-up question of how do we get to this point faster? And that's what you're really getting when you speak to an expert as opposed to going through AI. They're showing you how to be able to get to that point faster so that you can get where you need to be able to go. And you're not going in too early, you're not going in too late, you're going
Yeah.
in just at the right time. So
Right.
yeah, you said that and just reminded me of that again to go. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll speak to someone and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna ask Chat GPT and I'm gonna this and I'm that," and I'm like, I'm listening to what your starting point is. There's things that you're missing, so that if you just give it what you just said to me, I can already tell you what kind of response it's going to give you. I may not say it word for word, but that's what leads into that predictive story or that cautionary tale of okay,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can wait for the consequences to kick in, or you can listen to what I'm saying now. But like either way, you're going to get where you're trying to go. It's just what are you going to go through to be able to get there?
Yeah. Yeah. And that consultation should never be a one-off, you know? I always tell people the consultations minimum should be you should have at least 2, because, and come to a consultation, I ask people to come with 1 problem. Let's try to solve 1 problem. And then you wanna have that second consultation because whatever advice you're given, you wanna try to implement, and then you're gonna have results, right? So you wanna have a second call, at least a second call, because you wanna tweak. Either it worked or it didn't work. If it worked, you know, you want it to work better. So I know what advice you got. I know how you implemented it. I know what the results were. Let's tweak it and make it even better to get even better results. If it didn't work, let's understand what all the circumstances were that might have led
Hmm.
this to not work, and let's tweak that to see if we can get it to work. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. The first version is this is the cookie cutter. The second one is, okay, what did you do with the cookie cutter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because whatever you did with it is what's going to show someone how to be able to customize it. But if you try to get it all in one call, you're only going to get the cookie cutter. This is the universal thing, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be customized to you. And you have to be savvy enough to know how to be able to take whatever it is you're getting and figure out how to be able to customize it to you. All right. Well, yeah, like I said, I'm all about flowers. I want to make sure that people not only understand that I'm not just bringing random people on, I'm bringing people on that are doing things in a way that is actually going to help them get the results. And you were one of those people. So I wanted to make sure that we covered that part as well. We're doing a series, but I wanted to dig into that a little bit more. With that, that's all I have. I want to make sure that we were showing people why you're on the podcast, what makes you great, and then ending on that note. So with that, I will say thank you so much for your time. Like, share, and subscribe. And we have one more left. So we will see you next time.
All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to the last segment.